This orientation will prepare you to begin the journey of accreditation as a volunteer for MEAC or as a representative for a new or existing direct entry midwifery school. We will cover 4 parts. First, we will understand what accreditation is. Then, we will review MEAC's role within higher education and the midwifery community. Next, we will look at the process of becoming MEAC accredited. And finally, we will introduce the 2013 MEAC standards and prepare you for the next step of your training. Let's begin. The practice of accreditation is a means of conducting non-governmental peer evaluation of educational institutions and programs in order to ensure a basic level of quality. Private educational associations, such as MEAC, adopt criteria reflecting the qualities of a sound educational program and develop procedures for evaluating institutions and programs to determine whether they are operating at basic levels of quality. Peers within the community then determine whether schools meet the criteria and ensure consistency among the schools. The value of accreditation includes accountability to students, peers, and the public, quality assurance to assure the programs have the necessary institutional support, faculty, and other resources, quality improvement to improve the quality of education through a process of self-evaluation and feedback from other educators, and credentialing to assure graduates will meet the requirements for national certification and/or state licensure. Accreditation is related to regulation. Regulation of midwifery schools has several facets. All schools, both accredited and unaccredited, are subject to the laws of the state in which the school exists. This can become particularly complicated when dealing with distance and correspondence education because having students in more than just the school's home state can trigger state regulation in areas that the school may not have been expecting. State authorization is an evolving issue, and MEAC is working hard to help its schools understand the new requirements. Both accredited and unaccredited schools that meet certain criteria are also subject to federal laws governing education. MEAC's regulation comes in on the federal side. The U.S. Department of Education requires certain levels of reporting and compliance from MEAC about how it conducts accreditation activities. Those requirements set up a framework for the standards that MEAC has developed for its schools. Other regional or specialized accrediting agencies that work with schools are similarly sandwiched between the USDE and the schools. As you know, the midwifery profession is also regulated by a complicated web of state laws that vary from one area to another. Schools should be familiar with the varying state laws so that they can advise their students and graduates. This is the end of Part 1. Please take a moment to review this question. The primary work of review during an accreditation process is performed by whom? A. Government officials. B. Peers who have volunteered. C. MEAC staff. Or D. Students and staff at the school. If you chose B. Peers who have volunteered, you are correct. Let's move on to Part 2. What is MEAC? Accrediting agencies are tasked with 1. Developing evaluation criteria, and 2. Conducting peer evaluations to assess whether the criteria are met. The United States Department of Education recognizes agencies that meet specific criteria, including organization and administration and fiscal responsibility, accreditation standards, application of standards ensuring consistency, and monitoring, reevaluation, and enforcement of the standards. Essentially, MEAC answers to the USDE in much the same way that accredited schools answer to MEAC. MEAC is recognized by the USDE to accredit programs within accredited institutions, non-degree granting institutions, degree granting institutions, and those with distance learning and correspondence education. MEAC accredits programs that incorporate classroom-based courses, distance education, correspondence courses, and hybrid models for course delivery. However, all programs include clinical training, which typically occurs in community-based midwifery practices and is always under the direct supervision of a qualified preceptor. If you are involved with the accreditation of a school that offers distance or correspondence education, you may also be required to participate in a MEAC training on issues unique to distance and correspondence education. Our nearest cousin, the Accreditation Commission for Midwifery Education, or ACME, has also been recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as a programmatic accrediting agency for nurse midwifery education programs. While nurse midwives and direct entry midwives share many philosophies, it is important to recognize the distinction between the two professions and the two accrediting bodies. Since 1989, MEAC has been growing and working to improve midwifery education in the United States. These numbers may seem small, but in late 2013, graduates from MEAC-accredited schools comprised close to half of all of the midwives who sought to become certified professional midwives through the North American Registry of Midwives, or NARM. As of early 2014, MEAC accredits 8 institutions, 2 programs within larger university, and is in the process of an initial review of 2 or 3 other schools. Although the stars on the map represent the locations of the administrative offices of each school, MEAC schools educate students in all 50 states through residential, distance, and correspondence education. MEAC is a nonprofit, tax-exempt organization. MEAC member schools elect a board of directors that includes practitioners, educators, administrators, and public members. The board makes all accrediting decisions, hires the executive director, and has fiduciary responsibility. It meets annually in person and monthly by conference call. Staff is led by an executive director who oversees accreditation coordinators, a continuing education coordinator, and administration. The staff coordinates the accreditation and review work of a body of volunteers who work on accreditation review committees and CEU review committees. They review applications, conduct site visits, and prepare reports to the board of directors. The volunteer peer review is the essence of accreditation, and we hope that all accredited schools find folks within their organizations who can participate in the future. MEAC is part of a family of organizations that share a commitment to midwifery, but very importantly, MEAC is organizationally and financially independent. 90% of MEAC's annual income is generated by application fees and annual sustaining fees paid by the schools. The remaining portion comes from tax-deductible donations from individuals who feel strongly in accreditation. MEAC is also a member of other associations, such as the Association of Specialized and Professional Accreditors and the Academic Consortium for the Complementary and Alternative Healthcare. Membership in these groups help MEAC stay abreast of changes in higher education and connected to the larger healthcare industry. MEAC brings the information learned through these associations back to its schools and also represents its members in the larger conversations. Each of the organizations with which MEAC associates has its own philosophy and goals. This is MEAC's. Some highlights of this statement are that MEAC pushes continual growth and improvement led by evidence and best practice research. MEAC sets standards for education, but it does not prescribe how a school meets those standards, and MEAC values the diversity in educational models. MEAC strives to be culturally aware. MEAC values competency-based education, and MEAC promotes the midwives model of care. As an incoming school or volunteer, it is important to understand that this philosophy guides the work that MEAC and its volunteers do. Let's take a moment to review Part 2. MEAC is recognized as an accreditor by whom? A. The United States Department of Education. B. The State of Michigan. C. The Council for Higher Education Accreditation. Or D. MEAC is not recognized. If you answered A, the USDE, you are correct. Think of the MEAC philosophy statement we just reviewed, and please think of 2 values described in it. You could have answered any of these. Part 3. The process of becoming accredited begins today. Every school must complete this pre-accreditation orientation and the real-time pre-accreditation workshop afterwards. The orientation and workshop provide some information about MEAC process and standards, but it is important that the school representatives and volunteers alike take time to carefully digest the current MEAC standards. In order to become accredited, schools must demonstrate compliance with all of them. Additionally, you must understand the policies and procedures laid out in the handbook. The entire handbook, which includes the standards, is available on MEAC's website under Handbook. Once a school has completed the workshop and handbook review, it may invite MEAC to begin the evaluation by completing an application. Admissions requirements for schools include a completed application, which MEAC will provide after you've done your pre-accreditation workshop. On it, you must be established as a nonprofit or for-profit institution and be able to document your tax status with the IRS. You must have a governance structure in place, such as a board of directors or trustees. You must have a written mission statement. You must be legally authorized to offer educational programs everywhere you operate, and if you offer distance learning or clinical placements across more than one state, this may mean that you need to be authorized in multiple states. If there are other regulatory agencies with jurisdiction over you, such as a state midwifery board, you must be appropriately authorized to operate. You must have a course catalog and a student handbook. And you must ensure that you offer clinical experiences for students that satisfy the NARM requirements. The application is reviewed by staff, who then notifies the applicant within 4 weeks whether it is accepted. If it is, the school will be provided materials to begin the Self-Evaluation Report, or SER. If the application is incomplete, the applicant has an opportunity to provide missing information. If the application is rejected, the applicant can reapply at any time after they fix the problems that led to the rejection. When the application arrives to the MEAC office, a pair of volunteer reviewers are assigned to the school. The pair is called an Accreditation Review Committee, or ARC. MEAC staff confirms the volunteer's availability and interest, and also confirms the assignment with the school. The school has an option to request alternative volunteers. ARC members must commit to the following set of ethics and guidelines. They must not have any real or perceived bias about the school, such as being a graduate. All involvement with all of the schools must be disclosed so that ARC members are only assigned to schools for which they have no bias for or against. ARC members must protect the privacy of the school. This means that they can't take what's been learned during a site visit and discuss it with a niece who wants to become a midwife. They must commit to being accurate and reliable. They must know their roles and responsibilities. Ultimately, we all need to remember that it is real people volunteering their time to perform reviews. However, if an ARC member fails to meet deadlines or cancels on a site visit at the last minute, MEAC could be put into a legally tricky situation if it must delay the review to find a replacement. We count on the good faith of volunteers and the understanding and flexibility of schools to do this work. After MEAC finds the application complete, the school will have 26 weeks to conduct an internal review. We call this the Self-Evaluation Report, or SER for short. It is a comprehensive report addressing each benchmark of the accreditation standards. During this period, the school is busy preparing the report, but the ARC is going about their normal lives. Historically, the SER was prepared, printed, and bound into very large 3-ring binders in triplicate. You can imagine the size and expense of creating these binders and shipping them to reviewers. In recent years, MEAC has attempted to move toward a digital template, but we're finding that technical experience varies greatly among applicants, and sometimes the assistance required is not worth the savings. Soon, we're hoping to move toward an online application form, something that would be easy for the applicants, but spit out easy-to-read completed reports without the paper or the tech assistance. We'll keep you updated on this evolution. Until then, we use a Word document that lists each benchmark and demonstration that the school supplies. In this example, you can see a few types of demonstrations. Demonstration 3A4 asks the school to complete a separate table and attach it to the SER. Demonstration 3A5.1 asks the school to attach a copy of their existing policies. Demonstration 3A5.2 asks for an explanation or a narrative answer. When the SER comes to MEAC, it can be nearly 1,000 pages of questions, answers, and attachments. It is MEAC staff's job to do a checklist review of the submission and ask the school to supply anything that was inadvertently omitted. Then the ARC will dig in. Within 10 weeks, the ARC will determine whether it finds the SER to be complete and adequate. If it is, the team moves on to site visit preparation. If the SER is incomplete or inadequate, a formal additional information request will be made to the school. ARC and staff then review the additional information. If the additional information completes the SER, the team moves on to the site visit. However, if it is still inadequate, it is referred to the Board of Directors for MEAC to decide whether to accept or reject the SER at this point. During the review process, the public will be invited by newspaper legal notices and notifications to applicable regulatory and accrediting bodies to share information that they have about the school. The ARC will consider any public comment during its review call. Next, the ARC and a MEAC staff person will visit the school. Dates of the visit are tentatively identified at the beginning of the review and occurs at a time convenient for ARC, MEAC staff, and the school, about 19 or 20 months after the preliminary application is received. The costs of travel, lodging, and other site visit expenses for the ARC are mostly covered by site visit fees that MEAC receives from the school. To do this work, MEAC will need some space to work. Most schools have space on site, but because there's such a big difference among schools, there's a big difference in what these workspaces look like. This is an example of day one of a site visit. Depending on jet lag, the MEAC team will meet either the night before or the morning of the first day of the site visit to review the roles of the team members, refresh memories about issues that it needs to investigate, and look at the timeline for the site visit. Upon arrival at the school, the MEAC team and school representatives will proceed with personal introductions, a tour of the facilities, and an orientation to the site visit schedule. Then the ARC members get down to the business of file auditing and careful investigation of outstanding issues. MEAC staff supplies audit forms and will walk the ARC through the steps of recording their findings. This is done on paper, but many ARC members bring along a laptop so that they may review the electronic SER and the review templates while they work. School staff is available to the ARC during the site visit. The ARC may ask the school representative to find missing files, explain administrative systems, or answer questions. Before the site visit, the school provides contact lists for students, faculty, administrative staff, and graduates for interviews. Interviews may be conducted by an online survey, by phone, or in person during the site visit. It's important that all school employees are aware of the ongoing site visit so that they are available for interviews during this time. Depending on the complexity of the school, the MEAC team conducts this work for 2 to 3 days. At the end of each day, the lead ARC member informs the school of the progress and discusses whether the timeline needs to be adjusted. At the end of the last day, the ARC conducts a final exit interview and provides a verbal summary of findings to the school. MEAC staff will remind the group of the next steps and the time frame for the final steps of the accreditation process. By the end of the site visit, the ARC should be able to evaluate whether benchmarks measuring compliance with each standard have been met. Then MEAC staff helps the volunteers to organize their findings, plus any comments from the public, into a draft. The draft report is sent to the school, which then has 8 weeks to respond with corrections and/or additional information. There is a possibility that the school will provide an outstanding piece of information after seeing the ARC report. There are some special considerations for schools when the ARC can't review everything on site. Many MEAC schools provide distance or correspondence education in addition to or instead of on-site education. When the school offers courses through distance or correspondence education, the ARC will look for evidence that course materials are appropriate, that faculty has received training in distance or correspondence teaching, and that facilities include the technology needed to support students and faculty, and the technical support is adequate. As mentioned earlier, if you are involved with the accreditation process of a school that offers distance or correspondence education, you may need to go some additional training. After the ARC has done its work and provided a draft of the final report to the MEAC Board of Directors, the board then conducts an independent review. A few designated board members look at the SER and the materials the school has submitted. It reviews the site visit documents and ARC reports. An independent board reviewer will then present the whole package to the full MEAC board. MEAC has developed tools to assist the independent board reviewer in conducting and presenting its review. At this point, the board will vote on whether to grant accreditation, and often ARC members who are not on the board of directors for MEAC will be invited to the call to answer questions and hear the discussion. If the board votes to grant accreditation or pre-accreditation, then it takes a few weeks after the board meeting for the final report and a certificate of accreditation to be sent to the school. If the board votes to grant accreditation or pre-accreditation, but it has some concerns about the things the school needs to fix before its next review cycle, then the final report will come to the school with interim report requirements. This is basically a way for the school to make the improvements and let MEAC know what they're doing. The board may decide that it can't take a vote until it has more information from the school, and so it may defer a vote. At the time that this training was recorded, no school has made it to this point and then been denied accreditation. If there are serious issues, the ARC has given a heads up to the school, which may withdraw from the process before a vote is taken. However, if the school persists despite warnings, the board must vote to deny accreditation if it feels that the school has not met the minimum requirements to become accredited. If the board does vote to deny accreditation, there is a waiting period before it may apply again in the future. MEAC offers both accreditation and pre-accreditation. The primary difference is in the number of graduates who have finished the entry-level program at the school. Accreditation applies to those institutions and programs with 4 or more graduates from an entry-level midwifery educational program, the majority of whom are licensed or who are working in midwifery or a related field. Pre-accreditation applies to institutions or programs that do not yet have 4 or more graduates from their entry-level midwifery educational program. Pre-accreditation standards are consistent with MEAC's regular accreditation standards, and pre-accreditation status is normally limited to 3 years. Throughout this presentation, the word accreditation refers to both accreditation and pre-accreditation. This entire process, from the preliminary application through the board decision, takes approximately 2 years, which is on par with the length of time accreditation requires through other accrediting bodies in the United States. After the school becomes accredited, MEAC and the school will work together over the years to ensure that the school stays in compliance with the standards and makes improvements as the community standards for midwifery education evolve. Some examples. Each year in the summer, schools submit annual reports that include enrollment and graduation numbers, changes within the school during the year, and updates on other requirements. If staff learns from this report that a school appears to be out of compliance with the standards, it will be referred to the ARC. Depending on unresolved issues from the accreditation review, a school might have to submit reports on improvements that it's making. There are also a few types of changes that a school might make, like changing locations or changing owners. Those require special report and review by the ARC, and the list of all of those types of changes are available in the Policies and Procedures of the Accreditation Handbook. Let's review Part 3. True or false? The accreditation process begins with an application. An ARC member may not volunteer if he or she has ever attended any MEAC accredited school. Site visits last about a week. The MEAC board may decide to defer an accreditation decision. The accreditation process can take as little as 6 months. How did you do? Part 4. What are the standards for MEAC accreditation? The MEAC Board of Directors adopted a new set of standards in 2013 after a 1.5-year process of analysis, revision, and consideration of stakeholder feedback. Schools that apply for accreditation and reaccreditation will be held to these new standards. In addition to these 3 organizations, MEAC created a work group to review our standards in relation to developing the cultural competency of accredited schools and their students. The work group considered our organizational commitment to competency-based education and made revisions to standards to require more from accredited schools in the areas of assessment of student learning. MEAC has developed a series of trainings geared towards schools and volunteers who want to learn more about each standard. We encourage you to take the time to watch each short session to better understand how MEAC helps direct entry midwifery schools to develop top-notch training for its students and a new generation of midwives.